From the headquarters of FtS English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Sweeney Gray. Ecuador's President Lenin Moreno says that WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange will ultimately have to leave the Ecuadorian embassy in London. Describing the Assange case as a problem inherited from the previous administration, Moreno told journalists in Madrid that his government was working assiduously with the British government, and the only person I've never spoken to is Mr. Assange. He said he had always been critical of Assange's activities.
I have never agreed with what Mr. Julian Assange does. I have never supported tapping people's private emails to obtain information, regardless of how valuable it may be, to bring to light certain undesirable actions carried out by government or people.
And Denise has more on the reaction from Quito.
Hello, yes, indeed, the official visit of President Lenin Moreno to Europe have generated a mixed reaction and much speculation in recent weeks on the possibility of Ecuador to withdraw asylum for the founder of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange. During an event in Madrid, President Lenin Moreno said that Ecuadorian government are continually speaking with the British government. And after that, the Ecuadorian government also published an official statement where they have denied the possibility for withdraw the asylum for Julian Assange. However, the defense team, the international defense team of Julian Assange have showed their concern about the future of the founder of WikiLeaks. Also, his lawyer here in Quito, Carlos Poveda, said that if Ecuador will withdraw the asylum for Julian Assange, he should have the possibility to meet with the representatives of the state and also obtain the necessary information about his situation. Also, his lawyer said that they sent 2 official letters to the foreign minister of Ecuador, Jose Valencia, and until now the lawyers have not received any reply. So that is all for now. We will keep you posted with more information as soon as we can. Back to you at the studio.
Thanks, Denise, for that report. Now, President Moreno also spoke of the situation in Nicaragua, referring to it as crazy.
I feel that they went crazy in Nicaragua, and that is a consequence of a person staying in power for too long. At one point, they stopped caring about the people, and they are only obsessed about power.
All this while Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega says the attempted coup is over. New reports coming out of the country say people are fleeing to Costa Rica. Some people arrived by bus at Penas Blancas at the border with Costa Rica on Thursday. Others have been trying to sneak across the border, many of whom admit they were part of the violent protests. Those who do not have a Costa Rican visa can seek refugee status once they arrive. People have been charging money to help Nicaraguans cross the border illegally.
We're traveling with our children, and sure, it hurts to leave your family. That's one of the hardest things, right? Leaving your family? Of course it hurts. But since you have to get the children out of the country...
The death toll from the Fuego volcanic eruption 2 months ago has risen as bodies continue to be found by the authorities. Our correspondent in Guatemala City, Mario Rosales, has more details.
Continúa la identificación de cadáveres en la
2 months after the Fuego volcano eruption, the identification of bodies continues, and the number of confirmed deaths has increased to 156 in the last hours. 9 missing people were identified by the INASIF, which is why the number of casualties has increased, as relatives of the victims are still asking for permission to enter the area to find their loved ones. 156 deaths are the official number of the casualties, even though the relatives of the victims assured that hundreds more are still buried in San Miguel de los Lotes. Meanwhile, in the next hours, the relocation of victims to single-family shelters built by the Guatemalan army will be carried out to clear out the schools which have served as temporary shelters.
Thank you, Mario, for that report. Now, protests against corruption continue in Peru. Our correspondent in Lima, Jaime Herrera, has the latest.
The second day of protests against government corruption started earlier today with several demonstrations in different regions of the country. Here in Lima, demonstrations are taking place at Plaza San Martín. The general request of these mobilizations is to replace all corrupt government officials, as protesters march under the slogan, "Out with everyone." This corruption scandal has revealed the involvement of judges, prosecutors, legislators, and even journalists in different types of crimes.
Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos held a meeting with the Commission for Peace and 350 advisors to discuss how to enforce the peace agreements.
President Juan Manuel Santos presented the report on the development of the peace process to more than 350 social leaders.
This agreement not only includes the basic necessities for a peace agreement like this one, which is known as DDR, demobilization, disarming, and reintegration to civil and political life, but we went beyond that, because we were more ambitious. And that's what the international community praises and supports.
And even after these big improvements, the last UN report in Colombia states that this government and the coming one still face huge challenges. Some of them are the voluntary replacement of illegal crops, the reincorporation of ex-guerrilla members of FARC, and the protection of social leaders.
This is definitely something to congratulate, not less. We know this is a long process that still hasn't showed effective results. There's still a lot to do. This is not over.
One of the topics mentioned by the UN as a cause of great delay is the voluntary substitution of illegal crops, which they consider to be unsustainable.
Those families that choose to change their lands and trust the government haven't received technical supervision in terms of security, so they are vulnerable against armed groups.
Another issue is the effective and dignified reincorporation of FARC into civil society. This is also supported by social organizations.
We are sorry for what happened with the Gallo de Valencia and Tierra Alta case, in which no promises for reincorporation were granted or fulfilled. We hope these people won't take weapons back.
In the face of the systematic murder of social leaders that have reached 137 killings so far this year, the peace advisors have suggestions to prevent them.
The organizations must make a context analysis and real maps of risk, because the departmental police and army keep saying that nothing happens, so nothing gets solved.
The lack of government actions to protect the lives of hundreds of social leaders and ex-members of FARC has angered social movements to prepare one of the biggest mobilizations set for August 7th. The only goal is asking the Colombian state to stop these crimes against humanity.
More news in a minute, but first here's a video from our colleagues in multimedia. Welcome back. In Paraguay, one of the most contentious verdicts in the country's history has been struck down by the Supreme Court. As a result, 11 campesinos imprisoned over the Curugate massacre in 2012 have just been set free. After years of appeals and protests, the court judged that there were flaws in the investigation and the presentation of evidence, and there was no proof that the jailed men had any direct responsibility for the violence in which 17 people died. Several policemen and a number of campesinos were killed in a land dispute at Curugate. The massacre was used as a pretext for Parliament to overthrow Paraguay's progressive president at the time, Fernando Lugo.
We are happy because at last there is justice. It came late, but it came, and without political interference. Before, they sentenced us for political reasons. Now this is good, because if there is justice, there is the possibility of improving our country.
In the last instance, the criminal section of the Supreme Court agreed to strike it down. This was the last resort for the criminal case. This means that the sentences passed by the two lower courts are null and void, and that those who are still in prison can go free.
And the former Paraguayan president, Fernando Lugo, celebrated the ruling in favor of the campesinos. He said the judicial process was just a charade to hide dark interests in the area. Justice was made in Curugate, he said. And our correspondent in Asunción, Osvaldo Zayas, has more.
The campesino political prisoners have just walked out of this prison as the court overturned the sentence that condemned these 11 farmers to between 4 and 25 years in prison. They are now going to the resistance camp in front of the Palace of Justice, which is going to be dismantled, and then they will return to their communities. Nestor Castro, one of the leaders of this camp, announced that the fight for land will continue, and also added that this case against the campesinos had political aims and that the massacre was used to remove a legitimately elected government. He said the Paraguayan state should compensate the campesino families for this injustice. And he added the public prosecutor pursued this case without any evidence. We should remember that 17 people were killed on that tragic day, the 15th of June 2012, and these killings need to be clarified. For that reason, they will continue to demand justice.
The public prosecutor in Guatemala is moving forward with his investigation into the alleged illegal funding of President Jimmy Morales would have received during his race for the presidency.
The prosecutor in charge of electoral crimes continues its investigation, which would determine if President Jimmy Morales can be charged for receiving illegal funding for his 2015 campaign. So far, it's estimated that at least $1,080,000 were donated by businessmen and were not reported to the electoral authority.
We started our investigation on Morales' party. We obviously respect the president's immunity. However, he's linked to some other cases, and that's the reason the public prosecutor is following the case.
7 businessmen have been linked to the criminal case. As they confessed, they gave funds to President Jimmy Morales in 2015 and agreed to not to report the donation to the Electoral Supreme Court. According to analysts, the case is affecting the president's credibility.
The freedom of the President of the Republic is at stake. If he doesn't guarantee his immunity, he could be imprisoned after 2020 at any moment.
So far, the Electoral Supreme Court has opened a case against Morales' party, FCN Nación, as it considers there is enough evidence to prove it got illegal funding. However, it is yet to be known if the public prosecutor will start a process against the president. Morales was the candidate and also the head of the party, so he had responsibility over his party's finances.
First of all, the investigation started because the party used a mechanism that is not regulated in our electoral and political parties law.
Given the evidence against Jimmy Morales, we expect that a process is open against him at some point. I hope the prosecutor is aware of his national responsibility and does not bow to Morales' interests.
The Electoral Supreme Court has already rejected appeals filed by Morales' party, so the president may have no political capital anymore in just a few weeks.
The Lencas indigenous communities in Honduras are commemorating the Guanacaste, a celebration that is practiced among different groups of people that at one time had experienced border conflicts.
280 years ago, these two communities lived in conflict, but their Catholic beliefs as well as their indigenous rituals ended up a dispute that is now remembered through the Guanacaste.
It was religious beliefs that helped bring peace between the people. They started negotiations through messengers, but it was only through faith that the two chiefs achieved lasting peace between both municipalities. So we relive this historic moment every year.
On the holiday of St. James the Apostle, the people of Ojojona travel to Lepaterique, where religious activities are carried out and their commitment to peace is reaffirmed.
It's nice. I like these meetings here. The images of St. Sebastian and St. James the Apostle, so I come here every year.
We go every year to Ojojona. Since we are Catholic, we have to be there.
As the people of Lepaterique open their doors to visitors, the main ritual is held on the streets. Symbols are exchanged and the chiefs of both communities come together.
This brings a joy to the people. It's an ancient tradition. It comes from a very long time ago, and I hope we're able to continue doing it.
This event is done twice a year and lasts for 2 to 3 days. It always concludes with parties and traditional activities from each town. And this is how this peace encounter between these two communities ends. The next one will be in the month of January, when the Lepaterique visits Ojojona.
A community of indigenous people from the Amazon in Ecuador is urging the government to recognize their forests as a living being with rights. The Quechua Sarayaku community wants this recognition in order to avoid the exploitation of their land. They performed a ceremony in the capital Quito to push for the conservation of their territory and to preserve the spiritual relation that they have with the forest. The community says a new way of development should be promoted instead of just extraction and exploitation.
The territory of Sarayaku, Causac Sacha, in Quechua language, is a living forest, a living being and a conscious subject that has rights, as we, the original peoples and nationalities, have ancestrally recognized it.
Guyana and China have signed a memorandum of understanding on the Belt and Road Initiative. Foreign Minister Carl Greenidge signed the MOU that will see China aiding Guyana on much-needed infrastructural development as it starts to see major development in its emerging energy industry. The Belt and Road Initiative is the Chinese government's bid to enhance regional connectivity and embrace a brighter future. Time now for a short break, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Robert Mugabe was Prime Minister and then President of Zimbabwe from 1980 to 2017. That's a mind-boggling 37 years in office. So for citizens, this is the first time in about 40 years he will not be an option on the ballot. And that has ushered in a wave of hope for the country's young people in particular. So to discuss the atmosphere in the country, we're going to speak to Nikolai Edwards. He's a youth advocate who is in Zimbabwe as an electoral observer. Nikolai, thank you so much for joining us. So just tell me really quickly, what are your first impressions so far?
Now, I had the opportunity to be in Harare for the first couple of days that I've been in Zimbabwe, and only today I was able to come to Gwawanda in the Matabele Land South Province. And along the way, I've been speaking to persons on the ground, trying to get an understanding of how they feel about the elections. And for one thing, in comparison to elections before, people are beginning to feel that this is going to be a free and fair election for the most part. There are still some concerns that this election would have some ballot stuffing and things of that nature as the incumbent party tries to hold on to power. But for the most part, people are sensing change in the atmosphere, and they are actually even predicting a change in terms of the government.
Now, by all reports, it is the young people that are the most optimistic for these elections. Is that what you've been seeing?
Yeah. Definitely, because now they have a candidate who is on the ballot who they can more or less relate to, and that is Nelson Chamisa, and he is heading the MDC Alliance. So he is 40, and here in Zimbabwe, you have to be 40 and over in order to run for the presidency. He served in the government as a minister between 2009 and 2013, and he actually just turned 40 in February. So he has been speaking the language of the young people and really capturing their imagination.
So what is your schedule expected to be like for this observer trip, Nikolai?
Sure. So, well, as you know, the elections take place on Monday. So tomorrow is the final day for any sort of campaigning to take place. Yesterday, I actually attended an MDC Alliance rally in the Chibuku Stadium, and I can definitely sense that it is going to be an interesting election moving forward. So I will be moving across various stations, polling stations within the Matabele Land South Province, and just so that you know, there are over 10,000 polling stations across the country, and there are 5 million registered voters for a population of 16 million. So I anticipate long days ahead, but it's definitely worth the experience being here.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with us, Nikolai. Unfortunately, I can almost promise that we're going to call you and make your long days even longer. Thank you so much for chatting with us.
No problem.
All right, so let's take a look at news from across the world. All right, so
the Yemeni Air Force targeted Abu Dhabi airport and confirmed that the strikes hit their targets. Brigadier General Al-Jafri said it was the first time Abu Dhabi was targeted by aircraft. He went on to say that the next phase of the military incursion will be to hit the infrastructures of countries waging war on Yemen. Al-Jafri explained that the conflict is with rulers in the UAE and Saudi Arabia and not with the people of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Demonstrators gathered outside the entrance of the KTVU Fox Studios in Oakland, California, to hold the vigil of murdered Nia Wilson in response to the station's portrayal of her. The 18-year-old was stabbed to death in an unprovoked attack last Sunday. The network showed a photo of her apparently holding a pistol, which later turned out to be a phone case. Critics say the network's portrayal had racist undertones and tried to associate her with gangs.
What psychological mind state do you gotta use for yourself to walk your black face self out here to justify that shit? You have no recourse.
China has welcomed the newly elected Prime Minister Imran Khan's comments on wanting to strengthen ties with the country's old ally. Khan has also spoken about emulating China's model and reducing poverty in Pakistan, which formed part of his party's manifesto.
China highly praises this and believes that all people in Pakistani society, including Imran, are resolute supporters of China-Pakistan friendship, which shows China and Pakistan have an all-weather friendship. No matter how the domestic situation changes, The China-Pakistan all-weather strategic cooperative partnership won't waver, which is in the common interest of both countries and peoples.
Fast-moving wildfires in Northern California have killed one person. Citizens have started to evacuate the area as flames spread through homes and businesses, cutting power in the process. More than 1,700 firefighters were trying to extinguish the blaze, which has crossed Sacramento River and threatens hundreds of homes in the city of Rey.
Ecuadorian athlete Sarah Palacios is the first Ecuadorian woman to swim the English Channel, but the second Ecuadorian to do so. Swimming the English Channel is often called the Everest of the water. She started swimming on the night of July 11th at 11 o'clock, and she reached the French coast by 12 o'clock in the morning of July 12th. Sarah swam for exactly 12 hours and 58 minutes without stopping. She was given her food and water in baskets tied to ropes. And we've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at talisiotv.net/English. And you can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Talisio English, I'm Sani Gray. Thank you for watching.
Queremos verdad.